everybody, welcome to Maddie Trains. Today we're going to take a look at the MTH Premier Long Island Railroad DD-1 Electric. I gotta tell you guys, this is a beautiful engine, and it just doesn't get enough love here on YouTube, so I'm going to be going over all the history and features of this locomotive. So let's get started. So before we take a look at the model itself, I think it would be best to go over the history of the real DD-1, given how this engine was ran by two different railroads, the Long Island Railroad and the Pennsylvania Railroad. So when we take a look at the history of the DD-1 Electric, we got to understand that this was a Pennsylvania Railroad prototype, hence why you see the Long Island version here has a Pennsylvania Railroad-esque paint scheme. And that is because this engine was built for two different railroads. It was built for the Pennsylvania Railroad predominantly first, and then it was kind of just hand-me-down and donated to the Pennsylvania Railroad subdivision, which was the Long Island Railroad. This engine was predominantly built for commuter service as well as switching duties in different kind of rail yards, mainly in Sunnyside yards outside of Manhattan. The reason that this engine was even constructed was for the fact that all steam-powered locomotives or any type of locomotive that had heavy emissions were just not allowed within city limits and not allowed inside the Pennsylvania Railroad terminal. So, to combat this, the Pennsylvania Railroad decided to build this electric that you see here. This was kind of a shot at Pennsylvania Railroad going against New York Central's S1 Electric. That was also a very successful locomotive for its time. This engine is a AB set, meaning that it is a powered unit on the front and a powered unit in the rear. These engines were predominantly seen as commuter service locomotives. As well as on the Long Island Railroad, you would have seen this engine pull milk trains in and out of Long Island City, Queens, which was one of the rail yards over there, which was Sunnyside, where it did a lot of coach switching, pulling cars in and out of the city for steam power for Long Island Railroad locomotives to go further out onto the island. These engines are really oddball, as you can tell. They're more of like a shoebox style, which is really interesting. The overall construction is really different compared to other electric locomotives. How this engine has drive rods, like a steam locomotive, that is because it has a weird power source within the two locomotives. It's got a big motor in them in the real prototype. Speaking of the prototype, the actual locomotive, there is one surviving example left at the Pennsylvania Railroad Museum in Strasburg, PA. It is in the Pennsylvania paint scheme. I believe it also might have ran on the Long Island Railroad for a period of time, but that I'm not too sure about. But anyway, with all the history out of the way, let's take a look at the model. Alright, so taking a look at the front of the locomotive here, you can see a load amount of detail going on here. We have a lot of separately applied features on this engine, such as window wipers on both the windows. The overall front of the locomotive is just very unique and very cool to look at. I love the porthole windows that the driver or fireman will see on the locomotive. You have a crew figure on the left side of the engine here. You have a really nice headlight on the top. You have the Long Island Railroad Keystone, which is the old logo for the railroad, which was basically the little brother of the Pennsylvania Railroad, which is really cool. You also have a legible builder's plate on the side. You have a safety chain here. And if you look on the bottom of the locomotive, you'll see that on the cow catcher, you have brake hoses. Taking a look at the top of the locomotive, you can see all the wonderful rivet detail that was put on this engine, as well as the really different silver roof, which is really cool to see on this engine. Just makes this engine more eye-catching than normal. You can also see some of the electrical elements of this locomotive, as well as the bell coils that go all the way down into the cab, which is really unique and really cool. So now we take a look at the sides of the locomotive, and you can see the really nice crisp lettering saying Long Island on the front unit and then the rear unit. And this is what makes this engine so unique to me, and I just love everything about it. It has the drive rods, as I mentioned before. So you can see here, it has the gear linkage, and this is technically a 4-4-4-4. So this is a very interesting locomotive as far as the wheel arrangement. It is very bizarre. But it just makes me love this engine all the more. It also has tinted windows, as you can see here, and then you get the really cool number on the side of the locomotive. This is 352, and it says that this is the A unit, and the B unit is on the back. So that pretty much covers the entirety of the locomotive itself. I also want to point out that this is kind of acts as a MTH Premier or Rail King steam locomotive, meaning that this engine is tethered. So in between the units, there is a tether on the lead unit that you see here, meaning that this engine has to get coupled up to what is called its tender, meaning the B unit has all the sound features and so forth in it, whereas the lead unit in front of you here has the motor and all the other electronics to make the engine function, which I just find that very unique compared to other diesel or electric locomotives that are out there. It just makes this engine more interesting to operate. And I just got to tell you something else about this engine. This is a one-time release. They made this back in 2003. And to my knowledge, this is the only DD-1 that exists in O scale. It has not been produced or manufactured by anyone else. It has been made in HO scale in the past, as well as I think N scale, but this is the only example of an O gauge DD-1 out there, and it's just really beautiful. I hope you guys enjoyed all the features and detailing of the locomotive, but now we're going to move on to the passenger cars that I have behind it that are not from MTH. They are actually Lionel, so let's take a look. Okay, so what you're looking at here are Long Island Railroad heavyweight passenger cars. These were very common in the era of the DD-1 as well as steam locomotives in general. And these are Lionel produced cars that were made 2 years after the release of the DD-1, which I find pretty funny because Lionel decided to make BB-1 electrics, the Rats, around this time, and they sold a 4-car set with these cars. But they worked just as well with the DD-1 because the BB and DDs were pretty much built around the exact same time period. And these cars are just absolutely beautiful. I really want to show these off because they just don't get seen on YouTube all that much. They were also produced only the one time, and they have a lot of awesome details and features that I would love to share with you. So let's take a look. Okay, so I decided to pull out just the one car out of the 3 I showed you before, because pretty much all the cars that you saw are exactly the same. They're all built the same, don't have any differences, except for the fact that they have different numbers. So they each say 211, 212, and then 213. And then there's also a 214 that was sold separately. So they have the different numbers, but that's about it. Other than that, they're pretty much identical cars. But I do want to point out a few things on these cars. They have die-cast chassis, which is very nice, so you got a lot of weight to these cars. Second of all, these are all separately lit cars, which means they have individual switches on the bottom side of the car where you can turn on and off to have the lights on and off instead of being just completely connected to the trucks, which I find really nice, and that is also a nice feature. And these cars have less flicker than traditional Lionel cars. They also have a lot of beautiful separate details that we're going to check out now. So to start off on the sides here, you have the rubber diaphragms, which just add to it. And once these cars are connected to each other, you can see the coupler is a little bit closer to the body than a traditional Lionel car. So when you couple up this car with the other Long Island cars, the diaphragms are a lot more closer together and looks more believable, thinking that there's a walkway in between there for you to go between cars, which is also nice. You have all this really nice rivet detail on the side here. And the trucks are really nicely separately applied and detailed. You also have the handrails. The doors do open, so if you did want to put a conductor figure there, you can do that, which is also a nice touch. And then when you look on the sides of the car, you can see as I pan through the car that it is a furnished interior, meaning that there is actual people in these cars in the seats, which is just really nice. And you don't see that a lot on today's current Lionel or MTH cars. They usually just add cars or add figures separately. Like you can buy the figures separately and put them in. But Lionel at this time was putting passengers in their more premium cars, which is also nice. And it has green seats, and it just The warm light on this car when it's lit, it is really nice to see the detail. It just makes the car pop all the more. And then you have the nice crisp Long Island gold lettering and the numbers, and it's just a really sharp car. Alright everybody, that's pretty much going to wrap up this review. I really hope you enjoyed this as much as I enjoyed filming it. I think these are absolutely amazing locomotives, yet very odd, but that makes them all the cooler to me. These are wonderful models by MTH. If you can find them, I definitely recommend trying to get them. These are quite rare, as well as the passenger cars, and it just makes a really nice and interesting set. It really, really does. And if you add milk cars to this, it makes it all the cooler and more prototypical. Anyways, before I end the video, I'm going to show you guys running this locomotive on my club's layout, and I will see you guys next time. Thanks for watching.
Now riding on track 1, train number 250, service to Jamaica. Now departing on track 1, train number 250.